A radio show host in Seattle called Paul Gallant.
You are definitely living in the hindsight world today, Paul.
Do you feel there's been a consistent theme with the interceptions?
I think every interception really has a different story.
I was just kind of curious what Paul gets to say.
You got f***ing grow up, mother. Are you kidding me?
Paul Gallant, what the hell is wrong with you?
Hello and welcome aboard another episode of the Gallant Says podcast on this Friday. Gotta get down on Friday, January 13th of 2023. I am Paul Gallant. Let's have some fun. We're going to do an Ask Gallant Anything show. We used to do this when I was working at the Texans flagship back in the day. You ask any question, I'd work it in. I'm finding myself better when I'm operating doing this show with a stream of consciousness, and while I would like to take notes on things and sometimes dive into topics I don't get to do on my actual radio show, I think that some of the charm of listening to me is the fact that you have no idea where I'm going to go. Hell, most of the time, I have no idea where I'm going to go. But anyway, you can watch this podcast live on twitch.tv/Gallant Says or youtube.com/Paul Gallant. You can also subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Didn't post one yesterday because we had a lot of technical difficulties, and I apologize for that. Anyway, Friday the 13th. Why the fuck is Friday the 13th unlucky? Looked this up online, and honestly, Wikipedia didn't have that good of a reasoning as to why it's not. So this is from Wikipedia. First off, you've got the unluckiness of 13, and I guess there's actually a fear of this. It's called triskaidekaphobia. And I guess it goes all the way back to Norse mythology. 12 gods had a dinner party in Valhalla, and the trickster god Loki, Marvel star, was not invited. He arrived as the 13th guest, and he arranged for one of the gods, Hor, his name was Hor, to shoot another god by the name of Balder with a mistletoe-tipped arrow. Sorry, I gotta look up who Hor is. H-O-O-R. I don't even know what the fuck accent is on top of the second O here. Hor is a god in Norse mythology, the blind son of Odin and Frigg. There's a god named Frigg. He is tricked and guided by Loki into shooting a mistletoe arrow, which was to slay the otherwise invulnerable Balder. Wait a second, what? Okay, Norse mythology, you gotta work on your stories here. According to a Nordic prose, the goddess Frigg, Balder's mother, made everything in existence swear never to harm Balder except for the mistletoe, which she found too unimportant to ask. Man. Okay, very strange. Anyway, so I guess Balder died, and that's why it's unlucky, because the whole earth got dark and the whole earth mourned. It was a bad, unlucky day. So that's where 13 became unlucky. Also, Jesus' Last Supper and crucifixion, there were 13 individuals present. I guess. Okay, whatever the case, 13's been established as unlucky, and not really a lot as far as Friday the 13th being unlucky. In France, Friday the 13th might have been associated with misfortune as early as the first half of the 1800s. A character in the 1834 play Le Fitness de Gribouille states, "I was born on a Friday, December 13th, 1813, from which come all of my misfortunes." And also in a biography of Gioacchino Rossini. Rossini was surrounded to the last by admiring friends, and if it be true that, like so many Italians, he regarded Fridays as an unlucky day and 13 as an unlucky number, it is remarkable that on the 13th of November he passed away. So some random Italian guy is the reason Friday the 13th is considered unlucky. Dissemination continues this Wikipedia piece. It is possible that the publication in 1907 of T.W. Lawson's popular novel Friday the 13th contributed to popularizing the superstition. In the novel, an unscrupulous broker takes advantage of the superstition to create a Wall Street panic on a Friday the 13th. It's Chui. I think I butchered the pronunciation of that. 713 says, Friday the 13th is considered unlucky as hell. Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out. There's not really a good rationale as to why it's considered unlucky. But hey, could be unlucky for all of us today. Last night, I got to go behind the scenes with the Houston Texans. They are going to be making, possibly, not definitively, some changes to their overall look. I got to say, even though there's a lot of things to get pissed off about with the Houston Texans, and without revealing too much, I got to say, like, it looks pretty fucking good. It looks pretty fucking good. Anyway, I started thinking to myself before we get into these playoff games this weekend, what teams are in need of a makeover, if you will? Because I do think that there have been a lot of bad looks from teams in the NFL over the last couple of years. And I think it largely has to do with the fact that some teams have just gone away from their classic look. So we can just go through the whole thing. The Buffalo Bills should go back to wearing the uniforms that they wore in the 1990s, where they had the red helmets and they had the blue jerseys. There aren't enough teams in the league that have red helmets, which is why I think the Texans should wear theirs more. The Miami Dolphins, meanwhile, should go back to the uniforms that they wore when they, first off, were undefeated, and second off, had Dan Marino. The classic look is better than this weird, sleek look. Who are you trying to fool? Are people going to buy those new uniforms? For the life of me, I do not understand that one. Had to blow my nose for a second. Gross, Paul! The Patriots had an awesome look in the 1980s. The problem was they were fucking trash. Bill Parcells comes in, and they change their logo to this Flying Elvis looking thing. They should go back to that look now that they have come back to the rest of the pack. That look is exceptional. And again, red as a dominant color. Not enough teams that are, I think, really going all in with red. It's really just the Kansas City Chiefs. Lots of blue, not a lot of red. Here are the teams with blue. Bills, Patriots, Titans, Colts, Texans, Chargers, Broncos, Cowboys, Giants, Lions, Bears, Panthers, Seahawks, Rams. The teams with red, Bucks, 49ers, Cardinals, to an extent the Patriots and Bills, and the Chiefs. Yeah, a little more red. I suppose I'm pro-communism for asking for that. Other uniforms that could use a makeover. What the fuck were the Jets doing? I don't know what they did. Their logo is a football. Go back to what you had in the 80s and early 90s, or stick with the classic look that you had when Joe Namath guaranteed a Super Bowl victory. What the fuck are these? They're terrible. Bengals, actually the Bengals are doing it all right. Ravens are doing it all right. I like the Ravens uniforms. I'm not a purple fan, but they look good in it. Steelers, iconic. They're fine. The Browns, I mean, your name is the Browns, so what can you really do there? Some more. Jaguars. I think that the Jaguars getting away from those like two-sided helmets where one of them looked like there was puke on the back of them. Good that they went back to their roots, the teal. Jaguars, they're fine. The Titans, I don't know what the Titans are doing. Like you got Columbia blue as a color and you're not even fucking using it anymore. And your helmets have this like weird sword down the middle with a two-toned like stripe. I used to like the Titans uniforms when they, first came on the scene. Obviously it wasn't the Oilers anymore, but I think that the Titans might need to consider a rebrand entirely. I don't know, something like Tennessee Hillfolk, Tennessee Cannibals. How about that? The Colts, it's an iconic look, even though they stole the team from Baltimore. We've talked about it. The Texans, I got to see behind the scenes. It does look like they're going to make some changes. I think you're going to like them. Can't really give you anything more than that. Chiefs, they look great. Chargers, best unis in the NFL. Raiders, iconic. Broncos should go back to what they were wearing back in the day. The 1980s Orange Crush uniforms. The jerseys that they had before they actually won their first Super Bowl. The steroid horse, I don't know. Put it down, if you will. Eagles should go back to their Kelly Green look that they had in the 80s. Cowboys, great look. Giants should go back to their 80s look. I guess I just want everyone to go back to their look in the 1980s, huh? Yeah. What else do you have? Vikings. It's weird that the Vikings are purple. I've always thought that, but whatever. I guess that's not that big of a deal. The Vikings helmets are at least cool, and they went away from that weird, like, mid-2000s thing where they had the giant white stripe down the side. Those were ugly. Lions have a great look. Honolulu blue, beautiful. Packers, that's a good look. Bears, it works. It's simple, but it works. The Bucks are, remember when the Bucks had like alarm clock numbers? The Bucks are in a good spot, though I do think that they should wear the creamsicles to Bucko Bruce a little bit more. The Panthers have a little bit too much going on the unis. Just a little bit. I do like their blue uniforms more than I like the rest of their uniforms. Saints look good. Falcons should go back to the Steve Barkowski uniforms that they used to have. And again, red. They had red helmets. They had red jerseys. Those look fucking fire. I don't know why they went away from them altogether. Because when they wear their throwback red helmets, they always wear black jerseys with it. And it doesn't really match. But that's just me. 49ers, they're back at their classic look. I like that. The Seahawks should go back to their classic look. The Rams should go back to their classic look. The Cardinals are okay. So there you go, everybody. Paul Gallant Show. / Gallant Says Podcast. It's pretty bad that every now and then I confuse this show with my radio show. But anyway, there you go. Those are the teams that could perhaps use a makeover of sorts. Let's actually get to the games. On a Ask Gallant Anything Friday, you can ask any question. Twitch.tv / Gallant Says. YouTube.com / Paul Gallant. What do we have here? Any questions? What Texans change will have the biggest impact in 2023? Uniforms or coach? Well, the uniform change isn't happening this year. That much I can tell you. Coach, it has to be that by default. There you go. Is Paul broadcasting from his childhood room? No, this is just my apartment. And is someone vacuuming? Asks King of Twitch. No, the condo that is across the hall from me has been under construction, and they left the door open. They just ripped out all the walls and all the floors. So that's been fun over the last couple of days. But no, this is just a big old room with a lot of shit on the walls, because I'm kind of like those Italian mom and pop restaurants where I can't deal with open space on the wall. I just can't. Not at all. What do we have? We have Chu, who continues to say, hey, shout out to all the girls at the bars, in McIntyre's, Shady Acres. And on top of that, to Bottle Blonde. Okay. All right. There are games this weekend. Wildcard weekend's always a bit of a bummer to me. I think the expansion to 14 teams in the NFL playoffs has led to a more likely chance of like bad games. And you're going to get a couple, I think, this weekend. It's just a matter of which ones. So the first game tomorrow, the Saturday afternoon special, which always used to have like either an AFC South team or the Bengals, they're going in a different direction this time. They're going to play the Seattle Seahawks and San Francisco 49ers, which is a game, if you are familiar with the Seahawks and 49ers history, that actually does have a cool rivalry behind it. The Seahawks 49ers of the early 2010s was heated. You had Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh who don't like each other. You had the Legion of Boom defense and some really good players in San Francisco. Colin Kaepernick when he was actually an awesome player. It was a fun rivalry. I don't think it's going to be that on Saturday. And while there's going to be some inclement weather, and I know that Levi Stadium, where the 49ers have played in the past, has had issues with like the field just getting absolutely torn to shreds, World War I style, which could theoretically be an equalizer. I think the 49ers defense is way too much. And I think Geno Smith, it's been a fun year, but I think you've seen the real Geno Smith over the past month. I just don't see the Seahawks being able to move the ball against that San Francisco 49ers defense. And once again, Brock Purdy's not going to have to do that much. It's been a cool story with Brock Purdy. I do think that some of us have been a little bit guilty of perhaps like saying, oh, wow, it's such a great story. And ignoring perhaps some of his weaknesses. But I'll be honest, I haven't really watched a lot of Purdy in detail to tell you, hey, I'm not a big fan of X, Y, or Z. But I can tell you what I'm not a fan of when it comes to the Jaguars and Chargers game. The Chargers, for years and years, have always been the team that the online NFL media folks pick, like, this year's the year they're finally going to figure it out. Everyone loved Brandon Staley going into this year until he did some stupid bullshit the last week of the year where he's playing some of his starters late in the game. And while I hate that we are getting to a point where, don't play your starters at all at certain games of the year, as the NFL season gets longer and longer, you're going to see more and more weeks that are treated as opportunities to rest players. Staley was dumb for putting Mike Williams out there. He suffers a back injury, and he's going to be out for Saturday night's game against the Chargers, which could hurt because the Jaguars killed the Chargers earlier this year. The Chargers, you look at, you're like, oh, they're always going to blow it. And yet everyone still loves Justin Herbert and acts as if he is just as good as Joe Burrow, as Patrick Mahomes, as Josh Allen. I think there are some skills that he brings to the table that put him in the same stratosphere as those guys, but from a consistency perspective, we haven't quite seen it. I do like Herbert as a quarterback, though. On the other side of things, you have Trevor Lawrence, and I just don't buy into Trevor Lawrence right now. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, but I feel like he is being pushed into a conversation about being this, like, definitive young up-and-comer. A cautionary example of what can happen to you if you miss out on the first overall pick. And I think you should look back at that 2021 NFL draft and ask yourself the question, would it have been so bad to be the team picking second overall, the New York Jets, when after Lawrence, you had 4 quarterbacks to pick from in the first round? You had, yes, Zach Wilson, who was fucking terrible. Why did anyone think Wilson was going to work out in New York of all places? Not to be religiousist or something, but imagine thinking that a Mormon kid from BYU was going to make it in New York City with all the pressure that comes with being a quarterback there, with an organization that historically has found ways to fuck things up all the time. Because Woody Johnson's a dipshit owner. He's dumb. Somehow he was the ambassador to the United Kingdom. I think it's because he was friends with President Trump. I don't understand how he became the ambassador to the UK. He's a fucking idiot. I really strongly believe that. Like, Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick laugh often about what a joke the Jets are. They should have known to not take Zach Wilson. Anyway, you're in that 2 spot, and the quarterbacks left. Trey Lance, which has been a disaster thus far. Not entirely his fault. Mac Jones and Justin Fields. Now, this year's draft class is a little bit different because it does seem like it's Bryce Young and everybody else, unless you like CJ Stroud or unless you like Will Levis. But the Bears are picking ahead of you. The Bears are not a well-run organization. They hired, remember how long they were sticking with Matt Nagy as their head coach and Ryan Pace, their general manager? Those fuckers went with Trubisky over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. That's a dumb organization. The Colts picking 4th. Jim Irsay likes drugs. Not to say he's on them, and not to say that there's anything wrong with liking drugs. But Jim Irsay is a very emotional, like, quick to the trigger owner. I don't think he's very responsible. What if the Colts trade into that number 1 overall spot? Do you trust the Colts are going to make the right decision there? I think there's lots of reasons to have doubts about the Texans, no doubt about it. But are the Texans as an organization like that much worse than the Jets, than the Bears? The Bears have been bad for a while, guys. I know that they made a Super Bowl with Lovie Smith, but they've been bad for a while. They keep on getting put in fucking Sunday Night Football or primetime games. And I think you can make pretty strong counter arguments just about the Colts as an operation over the last couple of years. Like, they keep on trying to make it work with, like, veteran quarterbacks. I don't know. Maybe you need to take a step back and, like, suck so that you can get the early pick. So anyway, Some comments here. The comments about Irsay are pretty funny. St. Elmo's blow. That would be an interesting little spin-off of St. Elmo's fire. I bet Irsay has quite a medicine cabinet. Yeah, I would think so. Someone says, I would drink Irsay's blood to check out the buzz. Well, that might end not so good for you as far as, a health perspective. Those teams, they're not the smartest. Anyway, to circle back to where I was going, I don't think Trevor Lawrence is definitively a good quarterback. I think he is a quarterback that's better than anything that the Texans have. I think he has shown that he can play well from time to time. But I feel like that game against the Titans on Saturday, against a banged-up Titans team that had lost all those games in a row, with all the overthrown passes by Lawrence, which is something you've seen a lot. You might have watched that Thursday night game, too, against the New York Jets. I don't think he's been as good as he has been billed by a lot of people. And I think that he's going to fall flat on his face on Saturday night. And I'll be honest, I'm rooting for it. So there you go. The other games this weekend. Sunday at noon, the Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. The Bills are 13.5-point favorites. You got Skylar Thompson going to be under center for Miami. I had ESPN on, and I was talking with Sean Mapes, my producer, for the Paul Gallant Show, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5, after the show, and we had on the television this feature, and I was wondering what it was about, because it was on mute. And I totally forgot about the shooting that took place in Buffalo earlier in 2022, which was just absolutely horrible. And you have the Damar Hamlin situation, too, which, of course, stopped the game in its tracks. It is hard to think that anything's going to go poorly for Buffalo the rest of the way. They're the Super Bowl favorites going into the year. They were a team where people thought, well, if not for a coin toss, they might have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs, sort of forgetting the fact that if you play defense at all, I don't know, maybe you would have won that game. They were made out to be victims because they lost in overtime because they couldn't stop the Chiefs from getting the necessary yardage to tie the game and send it to overtime. Oh, but each team should have a chance to possess the ball. Fuck off. There's this victim thing. There are defenses in football, but anyway, everything has sort of added up to this being the year of the Bills, team of destiny. They seem to have a very fun fan base, throwing dildos on the field. And also I think, compassionate fan base, as you've seen before. Bills fans have weirdly gone out of their way to donate to random people's charities before. You saw with Andy Dalton when the Bengals somehow helped the Buffalo Bills get into the playoffs. I think that was when Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback. They are a weirdly compassionate group. And not I ran into a lot of Bills fans when I was in college, because they all kind of were in hiding when I was at Syracuse, which isn't that far away from Buffalo, but it does feel like everything is going in their favor. And to make matters even better for them, they're going up against a third-string quarterback on Sunday. For some reason, I feel like this is the game that's going to be closer than it should be. Miami's been scrappy with Buffalo this year, and I know, again, we're talking about Skylar Thompson under center, but 13.5 is a lot. So I think the Bills win, but I think it's going to be closer than that. E315 says, I didn't understand the donating to the toy drive when it comes to Damar Hamlin. I listened to Bomani Jones talking about this on a podcast. It is kind of a weird dynamic that sometimes for you to, I guess, even be thought of by people, you need to have something tragic happen to you. I think his toy drive had only raised $2,000 or so up to that point. And then all of a sudden, people think he's going to die, and they raise a lot of money. And it was cool. I don't think you could deny that it's cool. It was strange, though. 315 suggests why not to a heart association or something like that. And Huda is saying that Bomani is racist. Bomani does bring up race a lot. But in that situation, I did think it was interesting that he brought it up. It is kind of weird that it took him, Damar Hamlin, almost dying on the field for this charity to really take off. And I do think it is one of the things that we in the media don't do a great job of, is talking about the cool things that some players are doing. There are a lot of really good people that play in the NFL. And I think generally most people are good. And we don't really bring enough attention to some of the stuff that these guys do off the field. To be perfectly honest, because it's not entertaining. It's not fun. I think if you're listening to a show like mine or anybody else's, no, we don't look for the positive. We do look for the negative. And like, you know, for example, with Damar Hamlin, the conversation not too long after Damar Hamlin became about like, well, fuck Skip Bayless or fuck the NFL. And is that really, you know, a productive conversation? Is that really something that held any basis in truth? Like, was it the NFL's fault that happened? That they tried to follow protocol thinking that they were going to get back on the field after a 5-minute break? Like, if they kept on pushing for it after the coaches said, no, we're not playing, that's one thing. I don't think that actually happened. But I don't know. It has been an interesting last couple of weeks because now we have turned the page entirely when it comes to that. Anyway, Ask Gallant Anything Friday continues as we look at the wild card games. I do think the Bills will win that game. The Sunday 3:30 game is really interesting. If the Giants weren't the Giants, I think I would be rooting for the Giants in these playoffs. I think that the Daniel Jones story has been interesting because, I mean, Jones has been a bad quarterback for the majority of his career. And all of a sudden this year, Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka, they've made it work. They have played to his strengths. And something I was listening to in a conversation about like the actual Giants themselves, nobody is scared when Daniel Jones throws the football. And yet, they seem weirdly unaware of the fact that he can run the football. That's what's been great about the Giants this season is they're like, you know what? Jones is fast. Let's run with him. And it's weird because I don't think anyone thought that Jones was athletic until he had that run on Monday Night Football where he just sprints up the middle and he blows by everybody. And then he tripped at like the 12-yard line. It fell flat on his face. I forget what year that was. I think it was 2020. But I remember that happening. I was like, oh, he can run. I didn't know that. Sam Darnold had a big run like that before, too. The Giants have made a lot with only a little. And I do feel like it finally stops this weekend because there's too many people that are excited about the Giants compared to the Vikings. And while I have questions about Kirk Cousins and I have questions about Minnesota's history, they're low-key one of the bigger choke artists historically in NFL history. Outside of that one time where Case Keenum threw the ball to Stephon Diggs and the Saints fucked that up. I feel there's too many people jumping on the Giants for this one. So I do think the Vikings will win that game. And then the Sunday Night Football game that you have the Ravens 9.5-point dogs against the Cincinnati Bengals. Here's what's interesting about this game, and I don't want to speculate too much because I don't want to say, hey, I don't believe Lamar Jackson when he puts out on Instagram, on Twitter. Sorry, I just unplugged my headphones accidentally. Fucking fuck. There we go. I don't even know why I need... Oh, just unplugged it again. Okay, you know what? Screw it. I don't know why Lamar Jackson isn't playing in this game. And I understand that maybe his knee really isn't working and that his mobility is a big part of his game. But I do kind of think that if you are a quarterback in this league and you're playing in the wild card round of the playoffs or in the any round of the playoffs, you're not 100%. And at some point, Lamar Jackson said, I'm not 100% in that statement that he put out, both on Twitter and put out on Twitch. Not Twitch, on Instagram. And what quarterback is 100% at this point of the year? What quarterback is? And look, to his credit, or in his defense, he is a quarterback that plays the game in a way where it's going to lend itself to more injury. And if he's caring about himself and his future, a contract that the Ravens have given him an extension for, a situation where they don't give him wide receivers either, like I can understand being frustrated with that situation. But this is the first time I can remember a quarterback that maybe had a chance to play is not playing because he's perhaps thinking about himself. And while I'm not going to say like, hey, don't fucking do it. And I'm also going to say like, I'm not 100% sure that's actually what's taking place. There's enough smoke. There's enough tea leaves to put together where, yeah, it's 100% possible that he might be able to go in this game. And yet, he won't be. I'm curious. Very curious. And I think the Ravens have no chance because of it. Whether it's Anthony Brown, who played last week against the Bengals, didn't look good, or it's Tyler Huntley, who's like had a couple of flashy moments when he's coming in relief duty in the NFL. Yeah, I'm just not feeling it. Not feeling it at all, but no one should be. But anyway, that's going to wrap up today's edition of the Paul Gallant Show / Gallant Says Podcast, which are both available in podcast form. You've probably heard my radio show. You can listen to the podcast version of that if you ever miss it. You can also check out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud, the Gallant Says Podcast. But I hope that you're watching it on twitch.tv / Gallant Says and youtube.com / Paul Gallant whenever you can. Appreciate y'all joining me today. Quick show. I'm a little bummed out about the lack of questions asked in the Twitch chat, in the YouTube chat, but it's okay. You know, next Friday, although we're not going to have a show next Friday, but the Friday after that, we're going to be better for it. Anyway, so long, farewell. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend. We'll be back at it with another episode Monday at 1 o'clock.